This is just a quick video. This is TGIK looking at my post. Where you going, Ada? That's my baby walking somewhere. It's talking heads on the TV. That's me. Just to show some cool stuff. This is my late 2011, I believe. Yeah. 2 hard drives in that bitch. Sort of some multi-boot stuff, which I'm a big, many years ago read a post where someone explained how you can use Mac's built-in bootloader to boot other operating systems. The way that it works is, because I didn't like the fact that a boot camp install, there's all sorts of things I don't like about it. I'll explain more about that. You know, hybrid partition schemes. On older Macs, you had to basically change the registry and do an MBR hack to make it work AHCI mode. And I don't like that. So basically what we have here is Pro Tools 9 HD, which is a 10.6.8, Yosemite, Sierra, Windows 10, Linux, FreeBSD, Haiku, Android, a UEFI shell, Clover, which is the star, and the Lime is Refine. Now on other machines I've been cute, and actually it would say Clover instead of EFI boot. That's one thing I actually don't like, but you have to think ahead with partitions. And actually none of these, like when it's Windows or Linux or FreeBSD, these are actually not the disks that hold that operating system. They're HFS partitions. Because what makes, and I'll go in and show you, what makes Mac's EFI implementation unique is that generally EFI firmware is looking for an EFI folder and then a boot folder on a FAT32 formatted drive. Well, Macs actually don't use the EFI partition to hold the bootloader. They have a folder buried in System, Library, Core Services called Boot EFI. It turns out that you basically can have, and I'll show you, let's just like also show people that the shit be real. So let's go Windows. So here we are into a Windows 10. We're gonna skip disk checking, especially because I have a Windows 7 install. And sometimes Windows 10 is trying to be cute and messes it up. Though I don't really use the Windows 7 install because it's more proof of concept than actually that useful, because it's very fragile and you have to do all these registry hacks to make it not use a driver on boot, because Windows 7 was actually never a truly pure EFI application. It used the CSM layer to do video graphics. It's like, no, I don't care about no fucking Microsoft Office bullshit. There we go. That sound. That's my claim to fame, is piecing together that. So let's restart. So actually that Windows icon that I clicked on is actually a 200 megabyte HFS partition that has the boot MGR EFI file in it. And so it's sort of, the reason why I like using the Mac bootloader is because it teaches you how Macs actually boot, and it's a funny way to use their cleverness against them. You know, let's go more exotic. Haiku is basically like a BOS based thing, and they started making EFI images, and again, it's a little EFI executable that you just make the folder structure in an HFS partition of system, library, core services, and you have a file, boot EFI, that you just renamed to boot EFI. Just like with Linux, I renamed grub EFI, boot EFI. But we're gonna show you also, and so that's like, you know, let's go into Yosemite, just because I like the way the disk utility. Yosemite was like the last great disk utility, because there's also a way to do some work in the terminal where you can mount the EFI partition. You could do that with some Clover tools too. So in disk utility, you will see all these disks that are hidden. That's just like bullshit. Rolling Cloud's not bullshit, but this, you know, these MacBooks run really hot. Better reapplying thermal paste. So let's just say that, like, that Haiku we just opened, let's mount it. And the reason why they're not auto-mounted, because it'd be very annoying to have dozens of partitions on your computer that clutter your desktop. You create what's called an fstab file, which is something, if you're used to FreeBSD, is basically file system table, and you could say don't auto-mount it. So they don't exist. So like if you look at the Haiku thing that I just mounted, what it is, it has an EFI folder which is literally empty, system, library, core services, boot EFI. And I'm even cute and do a system version preference list, which is another file that's in there. Let's not open it with and you can make your own, like, it's BOS and it's Haiku, blah blah blah. Linux is a little cuter because I'm going to mount this Linux partition, which is not actually, like I said, it's not actually the Linux partition. It's an HFS partition. And so I copy that EFI folder, and in the library core services, I also have the grub configuration. But that's actually grub.efi that I renamed to boot EFI. You do sudo bless and then folder file. I'll explain that later. The command to bless these HFS partitions. So if I boot up Refind, it actually thinks all those little 200 megabyte things are, it thinks that they're Macs, because they see that folder structure and they see that file boot EFI. So it allows you to name the shit whatever you want, like those little booters, and you're taking advantage that the firmware can actually read EFI executables. So the way that I like don't clutter up, let's do EFI boot, which is Clover, which I guess on recent Macs fucks shit up for people. See, there's a little fat partition, boot Microsoft EFI boot from Win 7. Let's see it like fail. Now this runs a black screen for a while because the hack to make Windows 7 UEFI bootable is, again, like I said earlier, you have to disable graphical boot, because Windows 7's graphical boot actually uses needs that CSM layer to work. It's not pure EFI. And watch like it not work the day that I need it. I haven't booted it in a little bit. And that's also what's unnerving about it too, because you have this OS that you're constantly rolling the dice to even get to work. There we go. Thank God, still works. But there are times, I mean, I've had to uninstall, reinstall it a bunch of times because it's really just for being cute. But this is an EFI install of Windows 7 on my MacBook Pro that I have to use Clover to do. And again, we got the sound working in the same way, but instead of having to do test mode. I haven't heard my baby in a second. Oh, you're just on jail. Thank God for the gate. What are you doing, Ada? Yes. Caught. Caught again. So I'll get into like how you do this, because the way that I install Windows 10 also involves this, and I usually install, you know, the recovery partition and all sorts of stuff. And I'm not the one who figured out that you can trick the Mac bootloader to boot stuff. It was the first one I did was FreeBSD, because FreeBSD is like so easy to install on a Mac. And not because FreeBSD, yes, is part of the code that makes OS X. It's just, I don't know, just smart operating system or something. It's funny, the beginning basically looked exactly like, you know, University of California, blah, 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 FreeBSD project. This is like what verbose mode basically looks like. That's when it's switching to hardware accelerated graphics. I mean, FreeBSD is one of those things that you... This is like more nerdy than anything, because I have to use a USB dongle because the particular Broadcom chip in this, you'll never get stuff working. But I find, you know, I like, one of the reasons I got into multi-boot was because it's like having different rooms in your house. Things look differently. Linux is the most useful, and these other operating systems are sort of to be like, can you do it? How do they work? Teaches you how computers work, how computers boot. And this is what's funny about the Thunderbolt issue is we're having, is like, oh, all that shit works in Linux and fucking FreeBSD, no problem. Sees it. So in some ways, Windows is the stupid one. But you know, FreeBSD comes basically just text-based for most of it, but then you can add different desktops. This is the KDE desktop. And yes, the program to make that shit work is not always the easiest. What you doing over there, Ada? Getting in trouble. But once you learn it, it's sort of like you're falling out of bed. You can do it over and over. And interesting, and it kind of forces your hand to really learn about how it works. And that's, I love Refit and Refind. I mean, I've been doing this multi-boot for 15 years, maybe a little less than that. And so that was like the thing that first got me into it. And then I guess for me, this is like next level. And obviously it's fun to run Android. It's just a Linux kernel anyway. And it has problems, you know, but I can run Android apps. And I'm on Android, on an Apple. And that's funny to me. So, I'll be back to show people how all the shit works, but this is how it goes. Alright, y'all.